Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now this one I'm going to be doing an update for my gas grenade Pathfinder build. It's been a few days since I've done a full video update. I have been doing updates in post though, so if you haven't actually seen those, I did an update for day 3 and 4 in a YouTube post because I didn't really have time to put together a proper video. And yesterday I kind of had the discovery of gas grenade being able to crit, which is something that it couldn't do in previous patches. But today we're going to be doing a proper update for the build, and I'll kind of go over all of those changes that were included in the day 3 and 4 updates. Let's begin with something that I focused on for day 3, which is the defenses of the build, and this was mostly coming from our body armor and our helmet, right? So prior to upgrading my body armor and helmet, I had a pretty big problem with survivability. I had a lot of damage, but whenever I would actually get hit, sometimes I would just get chain stunned to death, and you know, that's not great. So upgrading defenses was a priority once I kind of started to flesh out the tree a little bit more after I got most of the damage on the tree, and I'll actually go over my tree in just a second. But I want to just discuss both the body armor and helmet briefly and talk about how I actually got these items and how you should go about getting them into the build without spending too much currency. So for the body armor, instead of buying an item, this goes for the helmet as well, instead of buying an item outright from the trade site that's already completed, you should buy one that's partially completed so that you can then attempt to complete it yourself at a fraction of the price. So for this particular body armor here, I purchased one that had the tier 1 increased evasion and energy shield roll already on it, and it also had the hybrid evasion and energy shield roll, and then I exalted the tier 5 flat evasion and energy shield. Now that obviously could have gone with anything there, but the difference in price between getting one that was fully completed and getting one that was, you know, partially completed was literally night and day. Like, this costed me, I think, a total of maybe 3 or 4 chaos at the time. It was barely anything. Very, very cheap overall to do this. And you can also, of course, make use of desecrated crafting. At the time, I just kind of got out of maps and I wanted to get a defensive upgrade. I just used an exalt and I hit a tier 5 roll, and I haven't actually switched this out at that point. This has been completely fine all the way up to, you know, I'm in tier 15s and bossing and things like that now, and it's been completely fine. Now, the other part of the defenses there is the helmet, which I did exactly the same thing here, except for this one is using a desecrated modifier to actually complete the item. So in both cases for these items, you want to focus solely on the prefixes, right? You want to be able to make use of your other items in the build to solve your resistances, but for these 2 items, this is going to be where the majority of your evasion and energy shield is coming from in the build. So you want to kind of focus fully on the prefixes. If the suffixes aren't great on these items, don't worry about it. Like, if you look at both of these items, this one has pretty garbage suffixes, right? Just the resistance is useful there for me. I don't need the reduced attribute requirements. I could equip this even without that. And, you know, it's the same thing here. I've got some intelligence there and some resistance. This one isn't that bad on the suffixes, but, you know, I don't particularly need the regen, right? So focus on the prefixes, get those really good, and if you have any problems with resistances, you should be able to solve them elsewhere on other gear pieces like your rings, your amulet, you know, your belt. So for this helmet, what you want to do is very similar to the body armor. You want to find an ancestral tiara, which is the highest base type for an energy shield helmet. You want to get one with a hybrid tier 1 roll. The hybrid can be with maximum life or maximum mana. Both of those things are actually quite good for this build. The max mana will make your mana regen higher, so that's kind of nice. And the max life obviously will make you a little bit tankier. And then both of them have the increased energy shield. And then you want the tier 1 maximum energy shield roll on there as well, and you want an open prefix. And obviously, if you have suffixes there that are not filled, you can always use the omen on both of these items before you actually go for that third prefix. You can use the omen to make sure that your exalted orbs only add suffixes, and that way you can actually, you know, guarantee a prefix when you come to desecrating the item. So you want to desecrate this, and you want to make use of an omen. I actually forget the name of it right now. Let's have a look. This one right here, Omen of Abyssal Echoes. So this one is going to allow you to reroll desecrated modifiers. When you actually get the options to choose a desecrated modifier, you can reroll the options once. So it gives you an extra chance there to be able to get that increased energy shield, which is absolutely huge. The difference between having the energy shield and not is a huge amount of energy shield, so you really want that. And obviously, this contributes to giving you a bunch of hit pool, but you also get a bunch of evasion as well coming from your passive tree, from this modifier right here. So those two things together kind of combine to make the build a lot tankier, and you can see how I've got, 3,000 energy shield at this point, 1,600 life, so we're much tankier than we were before. Now, one other thing I want to mention in terms of defenses is these boots here. This is not really an ideal base type. It is providing me with some energy shield. It's nothing, too special. This is more of a transitional item for me at the moment, but I was kind of having problems with getting stunned, and that's because your stun threshold is based on your life, right? And if most of our hit pool is from our energy shield, our actual stun threshold is pretty low on a baseline. So getting a bunch of flat stun threshold on an item is actually really nice, especially early on, and especially for mapping with, mechanics like Abyss that just kind of swarm you. Having good stun threshold is really nice. So this is just a bunch of flat stun threshold, and then you can see on the passive tree, I've actually taken this high alert notable here, which is 25% increased stun threshold while you're on full life. And obviously, as long as we have energy shield, we're going to be on full life. And so what happens is that this modifier from the boots gets added to your flat life to form your base stun threshold, and then that whole number gets increased by this right here. So, your stun threshold is bolstered a lot just by those few things, and you'll notice that you're not getting stunned quite as much. So that's really nice, but as I said, this is more of a transitional item at the moment. It helped me solve my resistances, gives me a bit of stun threshold, and it's quite nice defensively. So let's just discuss the tree really quick before we go over some other stuff. So this is what the tree's looking like right now. Obviously, with the information about crit being a thing now for Gas Grenade, I am going to be transitioning into crit for the late game setup for the build, which is going to be a lot more damage. It's probably going to drop a bit of defense, but you're going to get a ton of damage on top, so I think it's going to be worth it in the end. But in terms of things that I've grabbed, as I said, I grabbed this wheel here. This is really nice defensively. And I've gone through all of this stuff here now. I've also got these maximum energy shield nodes here. And for the weapon swap now, I've already swapped over to the crit setup. So before I was taking a bunch of curse stuff up here. And now I'm still taking this curse wheel for despair. But I now have Dark Effigy, which is a totem that kind of fires projectiles at enemies that are affected by chaos damage overtime debuffs, which includes poison. And so I've got a bunch of increased crit chance here for spells, which in theory should allow the totem to crit the target a few times, which we can then use our weapon swap, the Effigy of Cruelty, to apply critical weakness, and those stacks of critical weakness will apply flat crit to the monster, right? Flat crit to the boss, so we'll have a higher crit chance, and that means that occasionally when we actually do crit, that poison is going to deal a lot more damage. Now, one other thing to discuss on the tree is the jewel sockets. We only get a few jewel sockets on this build. I think we've got 3 in total. There's one down here, one here, and one over here. So for the jewels, we're looking for sapphires with increased maximum energy shield and magnitude of ailments you inflict. And then you can get some other modifiers on there that are useful. But those two, look for jewels to begin with just those two modifiers. They're very, very cheap. You can get them for like 1 exalt, for example, with just those two modifiers. And then you can start thinking about getting, a 3 mod, a 4 mod jewel after that. So this one has increased crit chance and some mana regen. That one's quite nice. This one over here is really good. This is increased maximum energy shield with damaging ailments, faster damaging ailments there, increased elemental damage, and recover life on kill isn't particularly useful, but it's there. And then this one isn't so good, but it's providing us a little bit of ailment threshold, so we don't get ailments applied to us quite as much. And in terms of the crit swap that I just discussed, I have updated the Mobalytics guide to include that crit swap on there. So if you want to head over to the link that's in the pinned comment below, you can actually look at the full crit swap that I've set up on there. And it contains quite a few changes to the tree. For example, on that swap, we completely drop this section of the tree here. And we go for this wheel here to get a bunch of crit. And we're also pathing up here and going down here and grabbing this, crit against blind and things like that and all of this stuff here. So one of the last things to discuss in this video, and one of the major things to discuss, is the weapon. So this is my weapon I'm using right now. This is not the absolute best, but this is very good. This is easily enough to do everything in the game on its own, right? You could have no flat damage from anywhere else in the build and just have this weapon, and this is enough to kill everything in the game. Most bosses are going to die in seconds once you have the proper setup going. So this is a lot of damage, and we can see on the mods there, it's not perfect because it's a tier 4 cold damage roll, and it's also a tier 2 crit, right? So it's not absolutely perfect, but it's very, very good. It's 5 mods, if you don't include the life mod there. It's basically 5 mod item, and it's very, very good. So I'm going to go through how I crafted this crossbow, and I'm also going to discuss a few ways to craft it slightly differently. So, step 1 is acquiring a crossbow with the flat lightning damage on there, and it can also have the crit, but you're looking for tier 1 lightning damage and then crit, or just tier 1 lightning damage on a magic item. So you either have both modifiers on a rare item, or you have just the lightning damage on a magic item. And note that if the item is rare, it needs to have 2 open prefixes, or one of the other prefixes needs to be another flat damage roll, right? So let's say you were lucky enough to find a tier 1 flat lightning with tier 2 fire and crit, right? That would be ridiculous if it also had an open prefix. That's going to cost you a fortune, I'm sure, to actually buy. But it might be the case that you can snap one up for cheap or something like that. But most people are going to be starting off with just the tier 1 lightning damage and the crit, or just the tier 1 lightning damage on a magic item, right? So, step 2, you skip this step if you already have crit. If you're on a magic item with just the lightning damage, on step 2, you use a greater essence of seeking. And I'll actually just show you that right here. So on the essences, we've got a greater essence of seeking, and this is going to add crit chance to the weapon. This is not as high as if you started with crit, but this is just another way to kind of get to the end goal. So that's how you get your flat lightning damage and your crit modifier on there. And obviously, if you already started with it, you can skip this step. Then for step 3, you're going to use an Omen of Dextral Exaltation to fill the suffixes if they're not already full. So this is fine if you already have 3 suffixes on there, no problem. If you haven't, you want to use Omen of Dextral Exaltation. You don't want to add a prefix, so make sure you're using that Omen every time you use an Exalt to get a total of 3 suffixes. So at this stage, just to be clear, you should either have an item with flat lightning and another flat damage modifier and an open prefix plus all of your suffixes, or you just have flat lightning with 2 open prefixes and then 3 suffixes. Then for step 4, this is the first part of the crafting process where the item can brick. You're going to use a perfect essence of battle, which is this one just here. And this is going to add a plus 6 levels of all attack skills. This is extremely strong damage boost for the build. You basically can't forgo this one at all. So this is going to guaranteed to remove a suffix because you already have 3 suffixes and this is a suffix modifier. So this is a 2 in 3 chance to remove a modifier you want to remove, i.e. one of the other ones that it added on top of the crit, and a 1 in 3 chance to brick and remove the crit. If it removes the crit, you need to start all over again. And obviously, there is a very slim chance that you added the projectile gem levels modifier already on there, and if you did that, then, you can skip this step. Then, for step 5, we're going to use an Ancient Jawbone, which is this one right here. So, now that we have 2 of our suffixes that we want, and we have 1 or 2 prefixes that we want, we're going to use an Ancient Jawbone to add a Desecrated modifier to the prefix. But don't immediately head to the Well of Souls just yet. You're going to also want an Omen of Abyssal Echoes so that you can re-roll the modifiers once if they spit out bad mods, right? You want to at least have a chance to get a good mod here because these Ancient Jawbones are not cheap. Now, when you actually come to unveiling this modifier, you're looking for one of 3 things. You want a high tier flat fire damage roll, a high tier flat cold damage roll, or a high tier increased elemental damage with attacks roll. For me, when I actually went for this, I got offered a tier 1 increased elemental damage with attacks. In my opinion, this is not the best outcome. The best outcome would be getting offered tier 1 flat cold or tier 1 flat fire because that's way more damage for the build. But I still couldn't pass this up. I'm going to take that every time, so that's what I went for. And if you get offered it and there's no other good options and you have your reroll, it's a bit of a risk going for the reroll because you might just get complete garbage after that. So I just went for it because that's what I got offered. So after that, you're done if you already had 2 flat damage modifiers to begin with. Okay, so for the last step, again, this is where the item can quote-unquote brick. It can't actually brick, but it can give you a modifier that you don't really want on there, and that's obviously not ideal. But for that last prefix modifier, you're going to be using an Omen and a currency item. You're going to be using an Omen of Homogenizing Exaltation. Now, how this Omen works is it will choose a modifier at random on your crossbow, and it will then choose a modifier tag at random from that modifier, and then it will attempt to add a modifier of that tag to the item. So let me just give the example with my crossbow. When I used this, I didn't have the cold damage modifier on there, right? So it's going to look at all of the other modifiers, and it's going to choose a modifier at random, then it's going to choose a tag from that modifier, then it's going to add a modifier of that tag, okay? So the reason why we're using this omen is because there's a chance that it can either choose the lightning damage roll or the elemental damage with attacks, and if it does choose either of those modifiers, it can choose the elemental tag. And if it chooses the elemental tag, it has to add either cold or fire damage. It can't add anything else. And that's what happened in this case, right? So the chances are, like, there's a high chance that it chooses attack because every modifier on the item has the attack roll. So there's a very high chance that it can choose attack, and if it does that, then it's going to pick any attack modifier. Every single modifier on the prefix is an attack modifier, so it could add a flat fizz, it could add increased fizz, it could add hybrid fizz, it could add anything like that, right? But we use the omen because there's a chance that it can choose elemental, and if a chance is there, you're going to use it. However, make sure you are using this omen along with a perfect Exalted Orb. It's very expensive, but this is what you're going to have to use. This guarantees a minimum modifier level of 50, which means that it's not going to roll a really low modifier in any case. And that's why you can see that, you know, I rolled a tier 4, which I think is the most common modifier that it can roll. So, you know, it's not ideal, but it's still a good outcome, right? This is a good outcome. It could have spat out some hybrid % fizz, right, which would have been a really bad outcome. This is a good outcome for the build. This is a perfectly usable crossbow, and as I said, the chances are that I don't upgrade this because it's going to be perfect for what I want to do. And lastly, let's quickly go over my gems because I think I made a few updates to these. So the gas grenade, I now have a 6 link. I think I didn't have that in the last video update. And I've also swapped out 1 gem for something different. So we were using elemental focus, which is 25% more elemental damage, which is really good, obviously, because we're poisoning with mostly elemental damage. But Arakade's Lust is just better because it's 6% more damage with hits for each poison on the enemy. We inflict 6 poisons, which means we hit that max 30%. And in Path of Exile 2, hit damage scales ailment damage, so this is the 30% more for all of our damage, not just elemental. So this is actually a lot more damage overall compared to elemental focus. So we're also using everything else that we already were: elemental armament, deadly poison, persistent ground, and then we've got a 6 link, so we're using encroaching ground for mapping, and this gets swapped out for elemental focus for bossing. And then we still have Withering Presence, we have Despair, Wind Dancer, and Ghost Dance. Nothing changed from the last setup. We are using Toxic Domain now, which essentially creates an area around you, and then when you actually poison targets, it attaches pustules to them, which can inflict another poison, which is why we're using escalating poison there, so we can get our 7th and 8th poison from this. And then we're also using deadly poison there at long fuse. I will make this into a 5 link and I'll probably add inspiration there because mana cost is a little bit of a problem with all of these gem levels. And then we have Dark Effigy, which I discussed earlier, which is, you know, part of the crit swap there to apply critical weakness. That has Urgent Totem, so we cast the totem faster, right? We place it down faster, and it has increased cast speed. And then Hardy Totems gives it a bit more life. Rapid Casting for even more cast speed. And then Pinpoint Critical, because we don't care about the damage on this totem. We just want it to critically hit so that it can apply critical weakness. So this is just more critical chance for the totem. But yeah, that is pretty much it. In terms of the next updates for the build, one of the main focuses going forward now is going to be more levels to swap into the crit setup, which is, you know, quite expensive and quite a big shift in terms of the build overall. But it's going to be the ultimate end game of the build. It's going to be a lot more damage. And then I'm going to focus on my jewelry, which is absolutely terrible. Like, look at this jewelry. What's going on there? Like, these rings, they're just, I think the ruby and the amulet, literally from the campaign. Like, these items are from the campaign. I just haven't upgraded them. One of the reasons why I haven't upgraded them, by the way, specifically the rings and the amulet, is that is one of the most expensive upgrades in the build, because we want the exact same items as the most meta builds in this league, right? The meta builds are Deadeyes using elemental bow builds, and the most meta rings that we want are those, you know, flat elemental damage to attacks and resistances. That's exactly what the Deadeyes want, which is why those items are so expensive. Like, even one flat damage modifier plus a resistance is a lot. It costs a lot. So that's why I haven't upgraded those things just yet. And it's the same with the amulet, right? Plus gem levels to projectile attacks is very, very expensive because that's exactly what the Deadeyes want. So that's why I haven't upgraded those things. And that's something to think about as we progress the build into the very late game. But yeah, everything going smoothly. I'm progressing just fine. You know, bosses just absolutely melt to the damage. Really, really happy with the build progress overall. Lastly, I will quickly mention these Talisman of Thruldana, I guess. This is a talisman that grants +1 to maximum poisons, but it reduces poison duration by 25%. I need to do some testing with these to actually see if these are good or not. My suspicion is that this is probably better on bossing because you can just drop a bunch of gas clouds on top of the boss. So this is almost definitely going to be better for bossing, but I'm actually not convinced it's that much better. So the reason why I don't think it's that much better is because right now I have these ones on here, the Sakawal's Rune of the Sky. So this is 5% of damage as extra damage of all elements. So that means 15% extra damage in total. You're getting 5% for cold, 5% for lightning, and 5% for fire. So each of these runes is 15% for a total of 30% damage as extra elemental. So that is 30% extra damage, and roughly the 2 extra poisons should be somewhere similar to that. We have 6 poisons, we're going to 8. It should be somewhere in that region, and I think that in terms of just keeping the build comfortable, this is just better because you don't want to be swapping for bossing, and I think for mapping you don't want really low poison duration because minus 50% or you just minus 25% is a lot, right? We already don't have that long poison duration until we've actually stacked up a bunch of poisons, so yeah, I think I'm not convinced these are going to be good, but I will probably do some testing with these to see exactly how they work. But that is it overall for the update for day 5. Build's progressing nicely. How are you guys getting on? If you're playing this build, let me know how you're getting on. If you're playing any build, let me know how you're enjoying the 0.3 League. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.